Welcome, Bitcoiners. Welcome, welcome, welcome. The sun, super up. Bitcoin, running great. Let's have a coffee, talk about what's new. Mm. Let's see who's said good morning to everyone. We've got Smitherine5, good morning. Timmy, good morning, everyone. Dave, we got a good morning. We got a good morning gang from Shane P-Man Van coming at us from Montreal, I believe. Good morning. More coffee and Bitcoin talk. We got a great one today, guys. We have one of the best ones I think I've ever had. Um, we were benefiting. Good morning, Daniel. Good morning, DM Zatar. So let's get started, though. We need a little Moscow time, right? We need a little Moscow time. So there's been some elections, some primary elections in America, and the city of Chicago. Right? I mean, when have you heard good news about Chicago in the past few years, right? It's nothing but guns ablazing, gangs, it's all kinds of crazy stuff. So you'd think it'd be natural that the city would choose a new mayor, right? They've had Lori Lightfoot, who we've talked about a bit here before, and how maybe she looks like a Batman villain, right? Some people have pointed that out based on her wardrobe and a few other things. So she lost in her primary and just wiped out, right? And now there's normally when you lose after having one of the worst mandates in the history of governance at the municipal level in America, you'd think there'd be some reflection, some psychological uh, comes with failure, perhaps even acknowledging maybe you didn't do it right, maybe you didn't get it right. That could be up there, right? In a city like Chicago, whose reputation is in the toilet. Well, the media did publish some of Lori Lightfoot's comments on loss, and here's what she says. Ousted Chicago mayor says she was treated unfairly because of her race and gender. That's all it was. Chicago just had enough of a black female as leader, I guess. So that's what we're happening. That's what's happening here, right? Poor Chicago. We'll see what happens next. Now, our top story today that we're covering is this whole China, the virus, and what's going on with the lab leak, and who knows, and what's happening. Yeah, Daniel says he's shocked. Shocked. There's change in Chicago. Now, I've mentioned this fellow before, Michael Flynn. He's a general. Michael Flynn, if you remember, was chosen by the Trump administration. I forget what position it was, but he was ousted because he had created communication lines in the early days of the transition government. So this would be December 2016. Trump had just been elected, but he hadn't taken office yet. And apparently, General Flynn had communicated with Russians, backdoor communications, and they had been intercepted by the deep state. And they created this whole trial against him. In the end, he was, I think, exonerated. I forget the ins and outs of a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of moving parts when it comes to all these people. But nevertheless, his reaction to it all is what we're here to talk about, which is he wrote a book. And the book has become really valuable. It's called Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. And like on this show, we talk about the battleground of World War III, what we're all experiencing here, as a both psychological and economic battleground. And those are really the big moving parts. There might be hot war within World War III. We're already seeing carnage and massive loss of human life in Ukraine. So there's definitely a hot element to World War III, but the main thrusts of World War III are psychological and economic. And what he says here is pretty interesting stuff because he's talking about the whole lab leak narrative. And this he takes from his book, so I'm going to read the quote. The levels of weapons grade propaganda and enterprise fraud are as vicious as they are effective in accomplishing two things: hoodwinking the populace and paving the exit path once the damage is done. The complexity of it is found in a layered approach contained within a shifting narrative that occurs incrementally. So, what he's talking about here is incrementalism, incremental shifts in the narrative are how the population is moved to one target or one objective or another. And what he's saying here, it's usually to accomplish those two things, right? You get the population to support an idea, and usually you get the benefit of being able to commit enterprise fraud on top of that population target moving. Incrementalism looks a lot like this, and we're going to talk about what's going on here. We're going to make a few predictions about what's going on with China, but this is what he's suggesting here in the fifth generation warfare book, that incrementalism is the main tool of pushing agendas and accomplishing work, right? So this is the psychological battleground that he's referring to. So the first step in it is just concern, right? And that's what we saw in the past couple of days. Now, remember we talked about, I mentioned he was, Chris Wray, I think I said he was the CIA director yesterday for some reason. I don't know why. He's the FBI director. Now, he's been on television talking about how now intelligence believes it was a lab leak, right? Remember, it started a few days ago where the intelligence community didn't believe it, just a couple of scientists and all that. And now it's moved to, actually, no, the intelligence community believes it. He actually released a tweet yesterday from the FBI handle at FBI, right? So at FBI wrote, FBI Director Wray confirmed that the Bureau that the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic likely originated from a lab incident in Wuhan, China. So now the intelligence community also part of this. So what does it mean, right? If you the steps of incrementalism, that starts with concern. Starts with concern. Oh, what's going on here, right? What is happening? Now, it shouldn't be lost. It shouldn't be lost that President Xi of China came out with a 12-point peace plan last week, right? Oh, let me see if that's pausing or buffering or whatever the hell goes wrong with this stupid thing sometimes. Remember, President Xi offered a peace plan just a few days ago, right? That's something that we commented on here. It's not a very serious peace plan, if you ask me, right? It's like, oh, do things that everyone thinks should be done and are pretty obvious, but might not make much of a difference, right? But we got to consider the timing of all of this new pivot and messaging and of incrementalism around China and its involvement with COVID and the lab leak. So immediately here, the minute President Xi offered the peace plan, we start hearing these stories, right? It came from them. So you see concern immediately, right? This is being broadcast everywhere. There's a bunch of examples now that we can offer. So we get the ambassador to China from the US, Nicholas Burns, did the media tour yesterday. He was on NBC, right? And here's what he said. He says, now understand that the United States is staying in this region. We're the leader in this region. We don't want conflict, but we're going to hold our own out here, right? In other words, follow the leader, right? So you're starting to see this conversation all over the place. And another piece of the conversation that's starting to be introduced again and again is that the Chinese are going to supply the Russians with weapons, right? That is sort of a new story. I kind of thought it was happening already. Like that doesn't feel like news to me. I know China is supporting Russia in many ways, and one can imagine they're getting, components of a drone or components of something that can be weaponized, so they get over whatever concerns people might have. There's ways to move this stuff across that huge border they have, and I don't think anyone would notice. So immediately here, you get Chancellor yesterday, right, calling on China to refrain from sending weapons to Russia and instead use its influence to press Moscow to withdraw troops from Ukraine. So that's from the Associated Press. So the German chancellor just yesterday now saying, oh, China, don't do this. So we're moving from lots of this concern. It came from there. And this came out of nowhere. Remember, we weren't allowed to talk about China had an involvement in COVID's release. Now, all of a sudden, the concern is being raised. We're seeing it broadcast, right? The news is really just that these days. It's really just people talking about stuff that we've probably known for a while, but now giving new slants and new opinions. There's no real research, as far as I can tell, being done on any of this lab leak stuff. I mean, I already commented days ago that Bitcoiners, through our ability to follow the money, we're pretty convinced that there was some leak going on over there, and we hadn't followed the scientists and followed the science or any of that stuff, or definitely not following the intelligence community. Not that we knew anything that was going on. It just looked like the money was flowing in such a way that probably it came from there, right? And it looks like we're right. So now you're seeing all this broadcast stuff. We're already into, and this is the trajectory of incrementalism. It starts with concern. You start hearing all these opinions bandied about. We're already into the proposals, right? We're already into the proposals. Don't send them weapons. Fight for peace, even though those who have offered a peace plan. However ridiculous it was, the 12-point peace plan they offered, right? So we get the follow the leader comments as well from the U.S. ambassador to China. They're the leader here, right? Caitlin Johnstone says, in the latest example of the U.S. empire admitting that it believes it owns our entire... Here's the U.S. ambassador to China saying, we're the leader of Asia. And she mentions it again, U.S. ambassador to China, we're the leader. And it sort of goes on and on. The way U.S. empire managers talk about leading ostensibly sovereign states with ostensibly independent governments shows who they really think own the world, right? So as well, yesterday we had a G20 statement, right? So already Moscow and Beijing sort of getting together this narrative saying, leave us alone. This is blackmail, they say. So you're getting more stuff to now talk about, right? So the proposals are creating more fodder for the broadcast news to comment on. News, it's just references, it's just more words that you can throw at the wall and more criticism. But you're seeing the escalation, right? You're seeing incrementalism at play. All they said a few days ago was that it comes from China and the media will do its thing. And we're seeing the narrative creeping further along. You get Bloomberg now raising a flag, right? I'm sure there's been a lot of trade. We hear about trade between China all the time, but now there's a problem, right? Bloomberg just published this yesterday. Russia's largest miner is selling nickel to China in yuan, right? Not for dollars. They're selling it in yuan. And people are saying that prices being set in Shanghai. And Lizel Hill here commenting is a sign of how the invasion of Ukraine is redrawing global commodity flows and handing greater power to China, right? So China, concern, we got to isolate them, right? More comment about what are we going to do, more proposals, right? So right away, you're starting to get a sanction type conversation, and Reuters on cue with Yahoo. Yahoo has very low quality journalism, very low quality news. They just reprint the original packagers of the news like Reuters. And here's what you have. Exclusive U.S. seeks allies backing for possible China sanctions over Ukraine war. Right? When were we talking about sanctions on China? Now it's a part of the narrative. It's another one of these proposals. We're already in incrementalism, finding ourselves, Trump is a master of this. It's called thinking past the sale, right? Thinking past the sale. When you're already talking about which sanctions, you forget to ask the question, why sanctions? Why, right? No one's even paying attention to that anymore. Concern about China lab leak has already moved into the world of sanctions and which ones are appropriate, and look at the nickel and they're selling it for yuan and that could be where we get them, right? So they're looking for help in all of this. The United States, Reuters published today or yesterday. The United States is sounding out close allies about the possibility of imposing new sanctions on China if Beijing provides military support to Russia for its war in Ukraine. So already we've heard about that for the last week, right? Russia cannot get arms from China. Now, what do I think is going to happen? What are my predictions? Well, I think China is going to send them, packages of things that can be adapted into weapons, and they're going to get to say, "Oh, it wasn't weapons, right? We didn't send them weapons." So I imagine that's going to continue. I imagine that is going to go through in the U.S. be able to garner any support, maybe. But as we mentioned just earlier, India looks like it's okay with a statement that China and Russia, at least, that don't blackmail us and let us on your hegemonic. So there's a whole, you motherfucker. Let me know if that connection problem is happening. That just warned me existed. Again, don't know why it happened. I tested the internet before, super strong. These devices are new. I don't understand. I can't explain it. I cannot explain it, guys. So just let me know if the audio is in or out or what's going on. Motherfucker, P-Man van. It's buffering. Okay, I'll wait a second. For fuck's sakes. Oh, 1 second. Better now? Yeah? Okay. Ah, gosh. What are you going to do, huh? But honestly, I know, people have been putting comments in YouTube about strategies. Look, if it's too complicated, I can't, I don't have, I'm not a sound engineer. I'm not going to do it. Like, I can't run an engineering rig to run the show. It's enough work and enjoyable work, which I am motivated to do and enjoy doing. I hate the technical stuff. Do you know what an annoying thing it is for me when I have the show perfectly ready to go, when I start plugging everything in and then this doesn't work and that doesn't work? I mean, I dread it. I absolutely dread it. And I don't understand how there isn't a tool in the world that is just a go live machine. Like, how has that not been invented? How does that not exist? It just makes no sense. Okay, um, so you're already in a world here where we're debating these proposals. It's a think past the sale situation, and you've already got folks here, calling for which sanctions are correct. Right, that's what's being published in Reuters today. Which sanctions are correct? You shouldn't have to. It should just work. It should just work. I don't understand, guys. Like, it should just work. All my equipment is good quality. It's Apple, so I'll give anyone who wants to criticize it for that. But I've been through the whole PC world too, and I hate those fucking things. Right? They're just as much of a pain in my ass. I've used all the stuff, as everyone has in their lives. So this is how incrementalism works, right? We get from concern, the broadcast, the back and forth, and now we're past the sale already into proposals, right? Now, the target is also pretty interesting, right? What that's about, using the opportunity, right? Stimulus form of change, right? And when you hear US say, we're the leader here, right? We're the leader in this area. This is even more aggressive than what we've heard before, right? We haven't heard them say that out loud. We're the leader of Asia, right? That wasn't something that was in the mix, but whether he meant to say it or whether it was a bit of an error or him just on live TV making a mistake, well, we can't really tell, right? But we know that these sanctions are now something that's real, being discussed, and is just sort of out. So where it goes from there, I think you're going to continue to hear things like, we need transparency from China. That looks like it already was one of the talking been distributed. You hear all the fake news journalists, JNN has repeated the line. We've mentioned here how regularly you can see the actual talking points disseminate into the low IQ news readers who don't even bother, changing the actual words that are chosen. We showed Woody Harrelson, for example, right? Woody Harrelson, when he had his Saturday night, 11:30 p.m. Eastern time, and by 7 in the morning Sunday, all the headlines from Variety, they all said the same thing: anti-vax conspiracy. That's how you see the actual funneling of the no IQ news readers, right? The people who read the news, like the Jake Tappers on CNN. That's how this stuff is disseminated, and you're already seeing that same language choice, right? We need transparency from China, transparency from China, and you're going to podcast, and I think you're going to see proposal around transparency in China, and it certainly is part of the target here, right? So this is just to let everyone know that this argument is going to continue. You're going to continue to see more incrementalism around China and around U.S. Relations with China. Now, I am no fan of the CCP. I am no fan of Putin and of national governments, really, in the end, right? As a Bitcoiner, our frame for World War III is really governments against people, right? The whole idea of the nation state. So it's not that I'm here to say good guy CCP. I'm here to say good guy Chinese people, right? Once American people and Chinese people and Russian people realize what they have in common, and it's Bitcoin, right? And it's Bitcoin, we're going to have a real change and possibly an end to World War III. Right? That's where we're headed. Now, the next thing is this General Flynn, and this is just a coincidence, but we love coincidences. We love synchronicity and all these things. General Flynn, I don't even know if you know this, is a surfer, right? He's a big surfer. He likes surfing. He's into surfing. And he's been talking about this incrementalism thing. That's why we're talking about it. But he's also been talking about our good friend Nayib Bukele, right? So he is on his way to surf. I guess there's some big surf world championship going on in Ecuador, and he's going to be there. He's all excited. And he's also been talking about Bukele's success, right? He's been talking about Bukele, the gangs. And here's what he says. Sounds like a damn good speech to me, talking about Bukele and what's been going on with the gangs. And he says, one we need from American leaders. Putting God first in America is what our founding fathers did, and removing God is what the left has been working overtime to achieve. Like many nations, our American values are being tested, but in the end, God wins. And he's talking really about the psychological. Remember, World War III is a psychological battleground, right? We've been talking about that a lot. We talked about it on the show last night that Enmity is mentioning faces. Cosmic Bitcoin with CK and Spencer Nichols. It was a lot of fun. And so he's been talking about the psychological aspect. Now, everyone has seen the images of the prisoners in El Salvador. And what's most striking, and I think what the point of the video was to show, is the uniform discipline and indeed the successful psychological operations that were conducted on these people. So we're not talking about torture, but we are talking about manipulation. It looks like there was probably some sleep deprivation there. It looks like the typical CIA handbook on how to break brains and beat them to get them to do what you want. But what are you supposed to do with these criminals, right? And here's what a lot of people are saying, and I think this is one of the best takes. Snowy slopes. The freak out over this is because they don't want you to know that it's this simple. You're supposed to be stuck in the bureaucratic human rights quagmire forever. You aren't supposed to know that it could all be fixed swiftly and cleanly. Now, have there been some mistakes? I bet, right? I bet. But lots of people talking about the ins and outs, right? Here's someone, everybody, this is a local, everybody feels free and can walk at night and do things when they couldn't. Go to El Salvador, talk to people. More Salvadorians feel free than ever before, more free than they ever imagined, right? Roger Stone says, President Nayib Bukele has put an end to decades of gang violence and terrorism, effectively restoring safety in El Salvador. What many said could not be done. Bukele is a patriot who puts the interests of El Salvador's people first. My pictures from El Salvador are so powerful. For the first time in generations, the guys on the left aren't in charge and the guys on the right are. Now, we're not a left-right-wing dichotomy here, right? We are anti-psyops and anti-brainwashing. There's plenty of brainwashing on the right. Remember who did this war on drugs for years. I mean, this was heavily endorsed by conservatives and right-wing people, which we reject, right? There are other ways to do the war on drugs that are clearly more effective than anything that we ever came up with in right-wing politics in America. So Maxwell Mayer continues, the media and the international left are working hard to change that. They want gangs to run the country. Now, I don't know if they want that, but it's certainly what it looks like, right? I can't mind read them, but that's certainly what it looks like. So you get General Flynn, who's over there, who's about to head over there, and is talking about what a benefit we've seen. So the incrementalism works in two ways, right? It's not just the manipulators who can use it. You can see incrementalism in Bitcoin as well, right? The narrative around Bitcoin and El Salvador and all of these things is also a competing psychological narrative that is also stepping up on this incremental pattern. And there's more going on to it than that, right? We already see now. We mentioned earlier the Germans talking about how, oh, please China don't, right? So they're involving themselves in that narrative. But we had big news out of China, out of Germany yesterday. And here's what it is, right? Germany's federal fiscal tax court confirms that Bitcoin is tax-free after a 1-year hodling period. You know how great that would be if that idea gets implemented in America or other places, right? The hodling, which really just induces savings, which is a step in the right direction, right? I think a major step. So you get a country like Germany with all of its problems right now, right? And I think having a sincere middle of the road position, right? I think America forced Germany to stay on America's side when they blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. But now, right, they're in the middle. They're wasting all of their retirement and pensions on the high cost of energy, which they're being forced to pay to Americans. They're not able to get any rapprochement any longer with Russia because the energy pipeline was closed. They're going around Canada and begged to build a liquid natural gas hub on our east coast in order to get it out, and which they were going to give us in Canada, right? It wasn't good enough, right? We were worried about something with the birds, or I don't know, some seals in the sea in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, who knows. But here they are making a major change. And this is the kind of thing that is the beginnings of a Bitcoin golden age, right? If this kind of thing catches on, you're going to have a whole population of Germans money again. And that would be a big change, right? The German people are ready for the breakup, Daniel says, right? Yeah, I think so. I think they are, right? I think they are. And it's not just there that it ends, right? You get, just like we mentioned the start with Chicago, right? Chicago just got rid of Lori Lightfoot. Look at the success El Salvador has had in this psychological reformation. Now, I think in America, we're going to add a bit of a different mix to the cocktail. And I mean cocktail in a real sense, right? We saw Mark Andreessen yesterday have a long tweet about alcohol being poison and how he's gotten away from it. You saw all kinds of people like Elon Musk and others in the comments having this discussion about alcohol. It's poison. Elon Musk even called it a legacy drug, right? What does he mean by legacy drug? He means, I think there's new drugs coming, and it's not fentanyl, right? It's the proliferation of the psychedelics of psilocybin and mushrooms. And I think in a lot of ways, the drugs that lower the ego and lower the violence, let's say, and can actually have been shown to cure addiction to the other drugs, could take over in a place like Chicago. I think you could see in a short amount of time a complete psychological revision of the violence and the crime and the terror that's in Chicago. And it could all change, right? We've seen now with Bukele, the first Bitcoin standard country, actually implementing policies that are changing the country, I think, for the better. Right now, it's messy. It's messy, right? I'm not interested in violence, but the type of psychological manipulation that was inflicted on these criminals worked. Right? It looks like it worked. So that has to be acknowledged, right? And again, this quagmire of where's the human rights and what do we do? And Foucault said your country can be judged by how it treats criminals. Oh my goodness, all these people in university that swear by that adage, right? That the most important factor in the way a country can be assessed and analyzed is how it treats its criminals, right? That's one of Foucault's big absurd arguments, right? Um, as if it's a major priority. So, Bitcoin also is within this, right? And just like I mentioned, these psychedelics, how they can really change reality for some people. Bitcoin is a flip. It's a whole new metric by which to judge the world around you. That's what stand as a foundational element to a worldview. Right? It really is a element to a worldview. And if it does sit as an element to your own worldview, your own psychology, it's going to be the best have to protect against the psyops because it's a type of compass. It's a type of instrument that allows you to protect yourself against the manipulation. It protects you against incrementalism that would harm you in the end, right? So incrementalism is a normal way to see things, but you can get off course without a type of compass, and Bitcoin provides that compass, right? And it's already happening in America. There was a major bill killed in the Senate yesterday, and it looks like the president will probably veto it. It's this ESG thing. I think Greta was arrested yesterday in another fake photo op, but she might actually be upset about this, right? It looks like America is going to get rid of this whole investment thing that would force Americans to factor in ESG considerations outside of balance sheet considerations and bottom line considerations, which is in a country like America to even contemplate. But of course, what we've seen is with these 15-minute cities, right? You get the New York Times today, the 15-minute city where urban planning meets conspiracy theories, right? Whole frame now that 15-minute cities are really about. Oh, am I buffering again? That these 15-minute cities are about conspiracy theories when really they're an old idea. As Sticks, Hex, and Hammer says, your sanitized term actually applies to an old concept, the commie block, comprised of self-contained sub-city components, right? And indeed, that's what it is. It's about making commercial decisions for you, consumer for you, logistical decisions for you, right? This is the communist framework in a nutshell. So ESG fit hand in glove with the 15-minute city framework. And it looks like it's going to fall apart, right? It looks like it's going to fall apart. And again, we don't want anything to do with the CCP and vax passes and health passports and social credit and all of those things. And it looks like, that was something that incrementally was part of the narrative around COVID. And you hear the Canadians going on about what a great idea it is, and down about what a great idea it is, and different countries coming up with their vax passes. Here in Barbados, where I live, all the locals are freaking out. They're implementing one here. I don't think it's going to stick, but they're trying to get these national ID cards going, and you need the ID card for all kinds of stupid things, even though you don't need a card to do these stupid things like go to the grocery store. Of course, it is vax passes and stuff like that, right? And you hear a lot about CBDCs and how they're a Trojan horse for social credit systems with these vax passes, and the incrementalism is, of course, there, but it does come up to a barrier, right? Which is the ability to push them on people and the ability to get people to believe in this idea, especially when you're, Vivek Ramaswamy, president, and a very interesting candidacy, I think. I've been negotiating with him to be at Bitcoin 2023 in Miami since before he named himself a candidate. I had him booked fully before he became a candidate, but it looks like he's a little busier. He's trying to come. He just communicated with me this morning, actually, and said, trying to make this work. So Vivek says here, Biden's first veto will be all about ESG because Biden hasn't um, vetoed anything yet. This isn't just a technocratic issue. It goes to the heart of whether we live in a self-governing. Biden believes your retirement dollars should be used to push his environmental and social agendas that Congress refused. So, what does it look like we've got? It looks like we've got the main narrative around COVID, the main narrative around in Europe with energy, the main narrative around Wall Street's future in America, all directly for the same incremental narrative around Bitcoin. Right? They're coming to a direct head. That's why I continue to predict that the 2024 U.S. presidential election will have Bitcoin front and center. And it will be a direct competition between competing views about the future. One I don't think we can lose, no matter how much propaganda and incrementalism is into people's heads. I just don't think we can lose that fight because we're simply on the sides of everyone's better angels. And we're simply offering a much simpler, more coherent vision of the future, one that most people can embrace. And that's what the separation of money and state starts to look like. And when you read all of these headlines, the antagonism towards 15-minute cities, the narrative overdrive to say, oh, don't worry, they're just a thing to get you to walk more, right? They have nothing to do with vax passes, nothing to do with consumer choices. But as Stick correctly points out, this isn't a new idea. These are commie blocks. This has been done before and it didn't work then. And it's not going to work this time. And it's not going to work this time, not because we have freedom fighters in government, right? It's not because of that. It's because we have people who have been awakened because of Bitcoin and are now able to orient themselves in a freedom much better than any other political democratic system allowed us to do. So I see good news in the news today. I only see ESG, the narrative crumbling. I see the inability for the American PSYOP machine to get a sustained and powerful level of anti-China antagonism. I think eventually the Chinese people, the American people, the Russian people are going to realize what they have in common. And what they have in common is a need for Bitcoin. And that is going to help wash away all these years of psyops, all these years of failed and corrupt institutions. And 2024 to 2028, we're going to start to see energy markets globally priced in Bitcoin, and a complete change in our relationship with the state and our own ability to express our freedom. So we're almost there, team. Today's a good day. Today's a very positive news day. And watching incrementalism come into the Chinese debate, I think, is part of the end game here. Left to go. That's what I see. That's what I see. Plenty of surprises to come. Right, very very complicated world, but I think it's almost there. Late today. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, that would be great. I think we're talking about the German stuff here. Surf City, love that frame. I have not. I've been to El Salvador. I went in late 2019, briefly on my way back from La BitConf in Uruguay, Montevideo. Um, and I really, I knew the next Latin show for Bitcoin was going to be in El Salvador, so I went and checked it out a bit. I just had a long layover and went around and checked it out a bit. I live in the city and they can't even stop mobs, and 15-minute cities are a joke. Yeah, 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 yeah. And I'm a fan of Chicago. I've been. I love that city. I find it to be the most American city there is. New York is sort of an exception. It's a unique place, but Chicago really feels expressly like America, and I love it. I love baseball, and I would go to the ballparks there, and I love the subway. I just love the vibe. But I wouldn't go anymore. I haven't been in 10 years. I wouldn't go today. I don't have any business there that's pressing and would require me to go. I have I guess a cousin-in-law, my wife's cousin, who went to school. I should run for mayor. Yeah, maybe one day. Maybe mayor of Montreal. Huh? I have a friend who ran for mayor, but Montreal is a real shithole, real corrupt. I love the city. I love the people again, but I wouldn't get involved in those local politics too much. But a beautiful place. I don't know if an English person. I guess they've had an English person elected recently, but I don't know how well I would do. Um, yeah, yay. Yeah, guess what? Remember Yay didn't get canceled by Adidas now? They've given him billions of dollars because they lost so much money because they can't sell the Yeezys. Yeah, I wish we did get a bit more from. I wish we'd get a bit more from Yay in the meantime. I do think his candidacy is serious, and it looks like he's dumped Nick or whatever his name is, the guy who is a bit, you know, antagonistic. Well, I'm not, I don't know much about him. The guy that Nick Fuentes or whatever. I don't know much about the guy. Sounds like he's a bit, I don't know, confused. But who knows? I don't know what to trust at all. I've never listened to him speak or spent any time around his content, so I can't really vouch for him. I know that Ye's involved with Ali Alexander, who I have nothing but respect for. So I'm more confident with Ye with Ali than I am with the other fella. But I still don't know what's going on. Again, I wish we'd hear more, but who knows? Ye's got his own stuff to deal with, and I don't think anyone needs. I still think that president is sort of below Ye. I think he can be the person who helps solve a lot of race relations and the bigger files in America that don't require political office. But I still think he'd be a great president. I really do. I really do. I would be happy to vote for him twice illegally with a stuffed ballot harvest him. I'd do that anytime. All right, team. Thanks for everything. Thanks for coming. Like, subscribe. I'll be sharing a short video today on General Flynn and incrementalism and all the good news that comes from incremental narrative building around Bitcoin and all the bad news there is for incremental building around the China-US fake fight. All right, everyone. See you tomorrow.